Hi y'all! Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a good day, and if not, I'm sending you spoons. Firstly, thank you all so much for 100 subscribers. It means so much to me, and I hope all 100 of you will enjoy your time here and my very random and niche gabbles. Secondly, happy Pride! I wanted to make a little Pride theme video for this year's Pride Month, and especially with the state of things at the moment, I think it's as important a time as ever to go through some highlights of queer joy and representation that we have, specifically in the media I'm most knowledgeable about, Transformers. So, casual fans of Transformers, or even those who really only know Transformers through G1 or the Bay films, might be surprised to learn that Transformers actually has a surprising amount of queer representation. Going back as far as one of the original toy lines, we've had a surprising amount of queer characters, and even more so in modern series like IDW Publishing's multiple comic runs for the franchise, and the newest cartoon, Earthspark. A few disclaimers before we get into it. This will mostly just be me listing queer characters in the franchise, alongside a few of my own headcanons, so nothing too in-depth as that is a much larger video I'm planning for the future. And also, please be aware a lot of this knowledge is either stuff I've learned through the fan base or facts I'm relaying from TF Wiki, so some of these characters and ideas may not be officially canon/debatable representation. I also probably can't list every single instance of actual and possible queer representation in this single video due to the sheer amount of Transformers content that is out there, so be aware that there might be other bits and pieces of queer representation in this franchise that I just wasn't able to get around to or don't know about. And of course, there will be spoilers for many of the series mentioned here due to the subject of this video. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. A majority of our earlier representation, like most when it comes to nerdy and niche media, is either hidden amongst obscure toys and official posts, or more vaguely hinted at. Like my personal headcanon, I believe the original G1 cartoon to be inherently queer/queer coded. This is just because of the way that masculinity is represented in the original cartoon, with these characters who more so now are well known for being hyper-masculine, but present very feminine concepts. From Peter Cullen's famous line, "Be strong enough to be gentle," and many other interactions and moments that can be read into as queer, which includes male characters roughhousing with each other in quite a gay manner, pun intended. The episode Fire in the Sky, one instance where a male character actually kisses another male character, Starscream, and of course the rivalry between our two main leads, Megatron and Optimus Prime. There's a lot more from the original cartoon that could be read into, but those are just some of my personal highlights. And the two vintage toys that I learned about through some of my mutual Rochelle's videos on TikTok. You should go check her out, by the way. While these two characters are not confirmed officially as transgender, they are considered trans by a good portion of the fan base. These two toys being Override from Transformers Cybertron and Road Rocket from a G2 toy line. Both toys were a case of originally being made male before either their series was brought to the USA like Override, or gaining a legacy toy figure and being referred to with exclusively she/her pronouns like Road Rocket. And due to the change in their genders over time, many trans fans of Transformers consider Override and Road Rocket to be trans. In the Beast Wars cartoon, at least in the Japanese dub of the show, there was the technically first canon gay relationship between Tigatron and Airazor. And while those of us who have watched the original English dub of the show know Airazor as female, Airazor was not actually initially designed with a specific gender in mind, according to TF Wiki. But two story editors for Beast Wars, Bob Forward and Larry DiTilio, insisted on making Airazor a woman in order to give the show a larger female presence. For whatever reason though, the Japanese dub made Airazor a male. TF Wiki theorizes it might have been due to female toys selling poorly compared to male toys, but in doing so, it gave us Tigatron and Airazor's gay relationship. Now, despite this, Tigatron and Airazor do not become an official couple in that dub until the episode Other Visits Part 1. This was because the Japanese scriptwriters could no longer work around changing the script in order to make them both appear as friends rather than budding lovers. And with how the two characters were animated together in that episode, you couldn't really go back and change something like that. That's pretty difficult to hide. But sadly, despite the abrupt showing of romantic interest between between the two in that episode, they are both promptly killed off not even 10 minutes later, and sadly do not make much of a reappearance in the show until the end of Beast Wars, where they both merge into another character, Tigerhawk. Very sad that this was our first instance of a queer relationship in this franchise, but I can assure you things do go up from here. There's also another obscure toy/minor character from Transformers Beast Wars named Arcatus. He was confirmed as Transmask by an official Q&A form by the name of Ask Vector Prime. In the Q&A post, it was confirmed that Arcatus had been built with a female chassis, and for those who don't know Transformers anatomy, a chassis is the chest of a Transformer. And Arcatus was stated as choosing to identify as male despite this discrepancy. Now, as far as more modern series, and by far the one with the most queer representation overall, is IDW Publishing's many Transformers comic runs. First of all, while I'm not sure whether this is actually canon or was a retcon point from an earlier part of the 2005 run, the Transformers race in that run are homonormative. This point was originally used to explain the disparity between the amount of male characters to female characters, but despite the clumsiness in trying to explain away why there's a lack of female representation, in doing so, this point made the whole of the 2005 run straight up queer. Because, you know, if a society is homonormative, that means things like same-sex relationships are normalized. And the series from the 2005 continuity that brought to light a majority of the queer characters us in the Transformers fandom know and love today was More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. For those who don't know, More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light were probably two of the most popular comics in the 2005 run due to its style of humor, endearing interpretations of beloved and new characters, enjoyable plots, and, of course, its queer representation. More Than Meets the Eye is also usually heralded as the first Transformers series to have a gay relationship between the characters Chrome Dome and Rewind, as opposed to Tigatron and Air Razor's relationship, since it's only in a lesser-known dub and not ever acknowledged outside of one particular episode, so there's not many people who know about those two, sadly. Whereas in Rewind and Chrome Dome's case, they are both characters who appear very often and are basically main characters of the series. They're both acknowledged as one another's romantic partner multiple times throughout the series as Conjux Endura, which is the Transformers version of a spouse. And they display many mannerisms of their affections towards one another, like saying, "I love you, my love," and just general intimate closeness that can be seen in the comic art. Both even have a history of having same-gendered partners, where Rewind was once conjux to the character Dominus Anbis, and Chrome Dome having been involved with many different partners, including Prowl. Rewind and Chrome Dome are very well-loved characters in the fan base due to this, and their, without spoiling too much, tragic yet sweet relationship. Now, despite Chrome Dome and Rewind being one of the most popular same-gendered couples in MTMTE and Lost Light, there are also quite a few other canon gay relationships and characters in the run who are very well beloved, including Drift and Ratchet, Cyclonus and Tailgate, Brainstorm and Perceptor, Pipes, Crankcase, Rodimus Prime, Prowl, Fortress Maximus, Red Alert, and Cerebros. Although I will say Prowl, Fort Max, Red Alert, Cerebros, and Rodimus can be debatable, as these characters had relationships confirmed by the author of MTMTE and Lost Light, James Roberts, over Twitter, or had vague hintings in the comics of previous relationships with other characters. However, I've included them here as I see the original author of the series confirming these things as basically fact. The 2005 run is also well known for what is likely one of the series' most popular trans characters, RC. RC was the first trans character in the comic run, and despite having a very problematic origin to her identity that involved a forced sex change, this was eventually retconned as a wanted transition and given some much needed TLC to her story. She is very well loved despite her rocky start, and universally in the fan base anyway, is interpreted as trans femme throughout continuities. RC also shared the first same-gendered kiss, as well as the first on-screen and unobscured kiss in Transformers history with her girlfriend, Aileron. Now, I was surprised to learn that RC and Aileron weren't the first lesbian couple in Transformers, as that title goes to Greenlight and Lancer, who were the first two female Transformers to be depicted in the comics in a romantic relationship, as well as Proxima and Aceleron, who are briefly mentioned as a couple in More Than Meets the Eye. And in a later IDW continuity, their 2019 run, RC was given another girlfriend, Greenlight. Her and her girlfriend raise a younger Transformer, Gage, who one can infer is their kid in a sense. Cybertronians don't technically have blood relatives in that run, but from what I've read of the 2019 run, I do believe it is supposed to be inferred that they consider each other a family unit, which is just really nice and a super wholesome thing to see from this franchise, especially with this very cute queer couple. You might also be surprised to learn that RC is not the only trans femme lesbian in the series. We also have the duo of Lug and Anode in Lost Light, who both, after adventuring outside of Cybertronian society, learned of female-presenting races who used pronouns like she and her. They both found an affinity in this identity and transitioned soon after. Last thing from the comics that I wanted to touch on, which is one of my personal favorites, is the Shattered Glass comics. Now, this is something that I just have completely read into as a fan, but I definitely think that there is some gay tension between Starscream and Skyfire in those comics. They both talk about each other in like super dramatic and almost romantic ways, and their story resembles that of a Greek romantic tragedy, without spoiling too much. And I feel, especially with the author of this series, Danny Lore, being queer themselves, it's absolutely meant to be read into as a bit of queer coding. Highly recommend the Shattered Glass comics if you are into that sort of writing, or even if you just like Transformers or Shattered Glass. Outside of the comic world and back to the cartoons, we have Knockout from Transformers Prime. And while he isn't considered gay in canon, he's usually described and headcanoned as gay by the fan base due to his very heavy queer coding. It is amazing that he is not canon because he's got so much fruit to him. Many in the fan base, myself included, also interpret Knockout as having a relationship with Breakdown due to their closeness in the series, and even calling each other partners, and while it's not in a romantic sense, the fandom does what the fandom does. And after Breakdown's death, due to the camaraderie and affinity towards each other, many also interpret Knockout and Starscream to be dating, either in between when Breakdown was alive or after his death in the series. But you will be pleased to know that while we may not have Knockout and Breakdown's relationship canonized in the show, the comics have by far made up for this, where in both of IDW's Transformers runs, they have acknowledged Breakdown and Knockout as a couple. And in the 2019 series, Treads and Circuits, Knockout and Breakdown share the first romantic, unobscured, male-loving male kiss in the franchise. Due to their relationships in the comics as well, this is also a big factor that plays into people interpreting Knockout as gay and in a relationship with Breakdown in Transformers Prime. They are another very well-beloved couple, and I have seen so much adorable fan art for these two. In Transformers Cyberverse, the writer of several episodes, who is also best known for working on many of the IDW comics, Maycat, confirmed that Acid Storm was gender fluid after a fan asked why Acid Storm seemed to switch between a male and female frame in the show so often, which is just a really cool like Twitter tidbit that I found on complete random while I was looking up like the characters that had been confirmed as queer. So that's so cool. It's a very small piece, but it is something that should still be acknowledged, and I'm happy that we have that confirmed. And finally, a show that's garnered much controversy in the past month, Transformers Earthspark features our first non-binary Transformer, Nightshade, who states multiple times throughout the show that they use they/them pronouns, as well as characters respecting and using their preferred pronouns, even Optimus Prime himself. Alongside Nightshade, I also believe another queer-coded character is Jawbreaker. As an Arrow A-Spec person myself, I related very heavily to his experience of trying to find his alt mode in the episode Outtakes. And while this conversation is heavy on the allegory and metaphors for Cybertronians, Jawbreaker makes many points that reflect my personal Arrow Ace experience, from feeling like he's broken to not feeling anything when he looks at cars and vehicles. And it's why I'm so happy kids today are growing up with a show like this. If I had had a character like Jawbreaker or even Nightshade growing up in the shows I watched, it would have helped me learn more about my own identity and what fit for me, and about the identities others could have, which is why it means so much to me to see characters like this in a franchise I love so much as a queer person. Alright, that's definitely not every instance of queerness throughout this franchise. Like I said, this is a huge series and there are so many different continuities, let alone characters who I could cover with this topic, but that is a good chunk of the main queer characters and relationships that we have. If you have any other tidbits about LGBT rep in Transformers, feel free to pop those down in the comments. Or share your own personal headcanons for characters and their relationships. It is always so much fun to hear people's headcanons since everyone interprets each and every character differently, especially when it comes to their own identities. Now, a little bit about the piece in the background here before I sign off. This piece I made a little bit ago to celebrate the beginning of Pride Month. There's also a little bit of history behind this piece and the headcanons I've chosen for Megatron and Optimus here. So originally, back in 2021, I made a Megop doodle like this one to celebrate the beginning of Pride Month, because I'm a huge Megop fan and I'm always happy to make a silly little doodle of my boys. The next year, I made another doodle for Pride as a sort of redraw for last year's doodle. And after that, I decided that each year I would make a Megop doodle and or piece for Pride Month. Now, as far as the headcanons I've chosen here, as you can see, I gave Oppie a demisexual pride flag on his cheek, and Megs has a trans flag on his cheek. If you can also see them in either corner, Oppie's Autobot symbol is in the colors of the bisexual flag, while Megatron is wearing a MLM flag bracelet. My oldest headcanon here is definitely trans Megatron. He is FDM, and I imagine it's very much the same case as Arcadis that I mentioned earlier in the video, where he was made with a feminine chassis but chooses to identify as male. That just fits more for him. Trans Megatron is also something that I identified with very heavily back in the day when I was experimenting with my own gender, so it was a bit of projection on my part back then too. And he has the MLM flag, as I can't see him as anything but a man-loving man. He is so gay for so many mech, especially Optimus. And Optimus, as a demi-bisexual, was actually inspired by a friend who had the same headcanons. And I just thought they made a lot of sense with Optimus's character and his relationships across continuities, especially because I wanted to respect the fact that Optimus has canonically been with femmes like Alita in quite a few continuities, while also bringing in my own headcanons where he's infatuated with Megatron into play. And as a demisexual myself, I feel Optimus absolutely has the type of personality where he only ever really wants to be with those closest to him, especially since Alita and Megatron are both well known for being very close to Optimus in different ways. You might also notice later on that I put a rainbow gradient on the debris that's kind of flying through the piece. I wanted to give this piece a bit more depth, and of course, with it being Pride Month, I had to add in rainbows wherever I see fit. Alright, but that'll be it from me for this video. Have a happy Pride, and remember that existing as your true authentic self, whether closeted or not, or discovering yourself, is in and of itself a revolutionary act.